Microsoft Fabric keeps showing up everywhere. But if somebody asked you what is Fabric, well, most people are going to struggle to give a clear answer, which is a problem because the chances are that somebody's already asked you or is about to ask you if your organization should be using Fabric. I'm Anne, and this video is going to give you the plain English answers about Fabric, so you know whether this is something that you need to act on or if this is just noise that you can ignore for now. But whether you adopt Fabric or not, it is central to Microsoft's data story going forward. Before we talk about what Fabric is, we need to understand the problem it's trying to solve. Because if you don't recognize that problem, then none of the features really make sense. In most organizations, the analytics and data solutions have outgrown their initial design. And what's really common is that expansion is far faster than ownership models and governance. And I know that there's good intention there, but there's a lot going on any analytics team's plate. You're expected to keep up with changing products and rising business expectations. You're still going to need to be able to always clearly explain ROI, operating costs, risks. And there's always somebody out there accusing you of just chasing the next shiny tool. What this can look like, for example, is that you might already have proper data job running or pipelines pulling data into a central store. This potentially powers a sales report that people actually trust. And then, usually by accident, you discover that finance has been exporting CSVs and they've been saving them into SharePoint, quietly using that as their own little data warehouse. Technically it works until it doesn't. And then suddenly you're not running a data platform anymore. You're spending hours reconciling spreadsheets. Can you tell that is a lived pain on my side? But finance didn't do anything wrong. They just didn't know the data was already there. Or they did, but it had been modeled so tightly around that sales report, it wasn't usable anywhere else. And that's the repeating pattern. Different teams solving the same problem with different tools, copying and pasting data as they go. Not because they want chaos, but because the system around them made that the easiest option. And that is why Fabric exists. Though we're going to see that the technology is only half the solution. Right, so if we understand why there's friction, then what's Microsoft saying they can do to fix it? Well, some people compare Fabric to Office. Lots of tools under one umbrella, and that analogy sounds helpful, but actually it hides the real value. I do see the similarities, but the pain is still there. With OneDrive, so often you email out a OneDrive link, and by Friday you still end up with 2 competing versions, plus a rogue one on Susan's hard drive. It's essentially digital mitosis. And that is not unsimilar to how silos form in fragmented analytic solutions, where ultimately you end up with the same customer list or sales transactions, and they're stored in many different places, in many different formats and different versions of the truth. Fabric seeks to tackle those silos, and Microsoft has pitched it as one platform. Different use cases for different users. Business users consuming, analysts modeling, engineers building pipelines, and data scientists being able to run machine learning in one platform. See, Fabric is often misunderstood because people compare it to using individual tools instead of seeing it as a platform. But what does that platform element mean? The key is to recognize that it's not just individual tools behind one single front door. This is where Fabric is really different from Office. The idea is that you're not arguing over whose data is right because you're using the same data. It's that underlying shared foundation, which is what the differentiator is. So instead of thinking of it like Office, I think about it like Google Maps. Google Maps stores every road, every building, every river once. When you switch between satellite view or traffic or terrain, you're not creating a new copy of the map. You're looking at the same map through a different lens. The underlying shared foundation for Fabric is called OneLake. OneLake is designed to store or point to data once. Your sales data is stored once. Power BI can access it for a report, data scientists can read it as a lakehouse, or Excel can read it as a table. It's the same data, one version, one truth. With Google Maps, you can explore the map natively. You can add your own pins or embed it on other websites. But it's the same map, stored once. That's what makes Fabric different. You're exploring and enhancing the same data. So what is Fabric? Sure, it's data capabilities across the life cycle of data, but the real differentiator is that really strong underlying data foundation and that drive for one truth, being supported by one admin console, one security model, one bill, sort of. But you can see why that really changes things, which raises the question, if you're already using Power BI, where do you stand? Because you've probably noticed Microsoft has been renaming things. The Power BI admin portal is now the Fabric admin portal. Licensing pages mention Fabric capacity. And if you're wondering if that means you need to rip out 200 existing reports and start over, no. But let's talk about what this does actually mean for you. If you're on a per user license, pro or premium per user, nothing really changes today. Power BI is still going to work exactly as it always has for you. And your reports don't break. There's no forced automatic migration. But this is important. If you're already struggling with report sprawl, duplicated datasets, or unclear ownership, or finance running a shadow data warehouse of Excels in SharePoint, then Fabric could be giving you a way to fix some of those problems without having to start from scratch. The Fabric solution itself has all of the technical integration options that you're used to. They even have a pragmatic solution for if your data is hosted outside of Microsoft's products, which means that you're not going to have to migrate and copy it all over. And if we think back to that finance team we talked about earlier, the one with the Excels and SharePoint, well, Fabric has a solution to that problem too. You can let them drag and drop those files into a governed lakehouse or shortcut to live folders. It's the same Excel workflow for them that they're used to, but it's now going to be sitting in that one foundation. And that's one of the things I like about Fabric. It feels like it's considering the breadth of how data is actually being used in real organizations today. So for now, it's an optional upgrade for those paying for Power BI licenses per user. However, it's different if you're on premium capacity already, which brings us to that question that everyone actually wants answered. What does this cost? And Microsoft have made that almost impossible to give you a straight answer to. If you search Fabric licensing, you'll find documentation that looks like this. And after reading it, you're probably going to be more confused than when you started. I've spent the time decoding this because a lot of people panic and assume Fabric is going to automatically become far more expensive. And in reality, it depends. Costs come from three places: compute capacity, Power BI user licenses, and data storage. If you're just looking at Power BI, the Fabric math starts to align when you're scaling beyond about 300 users. But benefits go far beyond just licensing costs. For example, if you're paying contractors to rebuild the same pipeline 3 times because finance, sales, and operations each need their own version of customer data, then that's not a licensing problem, it's waste. As it might be if you're using third-party tools or paying to store duplicated data. Fabric could be fixing that. However, I'm going to give you the warning now that an unmanaged Fabric capacity can exceed budgets fast. This is why nobody just has a straight answer to this will be what it costs, because Fabric costs depend completely on how you plan to use it. When evaluating Fabric, you'll look at the costs and what it can do, but a really big part of understanding any technology decision has to be about what doesn't it do. Back to that finance team example with the Excels in SharePoint. If we've now moved to Fabric, we've made the tech stack far more resilient. But the data ownership, the agreed definitions, governance frameworks, those aren't just going to materialize because you've enabled one lake. If your Power BI estate is messy today, Fabric is going to help you scale that mess beautifully. And I know you might think, well, what about AI? And indeed, Copilot is front and center of Fabric. But don't just chase the hype. You're going to need to put the work in to get the benefits from that. Essentially, as it is with most technology, Fabric enables discipline, but it does not create it. Understanding the platform is only half the battle, and that's something that we help a lot of clients with, designing and implementing operating models to get the most from Fabric or Power BI. So let's ground this with an example of what does it look like in an organization when Fabric is working well. Because most organizations operate where every new question triggers a new project or a new data set. Instead, the idea is that when Fabric is in place, sales, finance, leadership pull reports from the same governed semantic model. And the data engineers, analysts, and report builders all work in the same workspace and building on the same one-leg data. But only if your operating model, your ownership, domains, access rules is designed as intentionally as that technology. And that's really the point of this video. Not to persuade you to adopt Fabric, but to give you enough clarity to know that you need to assess the wider picture so that you're in a position to separate platform intent from feature noise and decide calmly on your own terms whether and how Fabric could fit into your organization. So now you understand what Fabric actually is and why governance is critical to its success. It's worth looking at how you're sharing Power BI reports today. Because even with the right platform, sharing data the wrong way can undo any ROI. Watch this next video where I rank 5 ways to share in Power BI.